Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special episode of Radio Offside. I'm Morteza, and I'm very excited to have the chance to talk to our next guest. She is the Manchester United correspondent for Goal, who has previously worked with Manchester Evening News. It is with great honor to introduce Charlotte Duncker. Charlotte, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and welcome to our pod.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So I would like to start off talking about the current situation in football with a focus on Manchester United. And how are the players, how are the Manchester United players coping with the situation? These are very unprecedented times, but I was wondering, what are the clubs and players' plans? And will we see trainings being resumed soon?
Yeah, so they've not been based at the training ground for the last couple of months, and they've all been given programs to work on at home. They were given permission to fly home if that's what they wanted to do. So Bruno Fernandez went back, Sergio Romero, Victor Lindelof. A few of them decided to fly back to their home countries for lockdown over there. So they've all been given programs that they've been working on. There's been regular check-ins with the fitness staff. They've also been a lot of mental well-being, checking the players are fine. So all that side of things has been covered as well. But obviously it's hard because no one knows when they are going to return, if they're going to return. There's still this commitment for a project restart from the Premier League. There was a meeting today where they've unanimously agreed that group training will begin again this week. It's starting in smaller groups, and then there's a phased return over the weeks, building back up to contact sport. Obviously, we saw over the weekend the Bundesliga resumed. They're going to be keeping a close eye on that and how that's been going. So at the minute, the players have all been working on their own. A few of the players have been spotted in parks around Cheshire where they live. They've been doing socially distanced training sessions together with a ball, because obviously they can all do their work at home in their personal gyms, but it's just not the same as training with a football. So they've been spotted in the last few days. I think there was Pogba, Victor Lindelof, Andreas Pereira, Anthony Martial. They were all in one session. Marcus Rashford's been out with a United coach. So they are stepping up ahead of this potential return, which they're hoping to have in June. So they've been given the go-ahead to go back to the training ground. The players went there on Sunday, I think, where they were all tested for the virus. And I've been told that at some point this week, they will be resuming training at their Carrington training complex. Specific date hasn't been given yet, but I've been told sometime this week. So it'll be interesting to see how things go. I think there's people like Sergio Aguero and Raheem Sterling have been quite open in coming out and saying they're not necessarily 100% happy going back into these situations. And you can get that feeling amongst players. The virus is still around. There's still a lot of people dying over here because of COVID. So you can understand players' wariness, but I think a lot of steps are trying to be put in place to make them feel secure and to make it the best possible, healthiest, safest way for them to go back.
Great, thank you. And you talked about Project Restart. Do we have any tentative dates and when that will happen?
The tentative date was, I think, the 12th of June. Mm-hmm. But the more you hear about that, the more that it's unlikely it's going to happen. I think it just gets being pushed further and further back. So looking like the 20th, around that time of June, is the date that's been discussed at the minute. But again, I think it's all going to be down to how the players go when they return back to training, because if one of them gets the virus, then and they all have to self-isolate for 2 weeks, then they're not going to be able to continue with their training. And yeah, they've all been working at home, but it's not the same. The impact training is not the same. So in essence, now they need a bit of a mini pre-season to get back to some sort of level where they're able to play 2-3 games a week, which is what they're going to have to do to squeeze all these games in. So I think what the problem you're going to have is they can set this date for whatever date in June, but it's going to all be dependent on how this phased return to training goes. And I think that might be why nothing's been confirmed yet. They confirmed today that clubs can go back. Some clubs are going back tomorrow. I think Newcastle have said they'll be back in training tomorrow. So if it's staggered over this week with them training, maybe in a couple of weeks they'll be in a better position to see how that's gone and see how they can progress from there.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and wanted to talk about post-Ferguson era at Manchester United. We've seen 4 managers with very different styles at the helm. They had very different philosophies, recruitment plans were very different, and this has made the transition even more difficult. And so I just wanted to know in your opinion, what has gone wrong? Was it that the managers did not get enough support? The plan was not laid out well on how they want to deal with this transition. I know there's not one factor, but in general terms, what went wrong?
I think, right, you say there's a lot of factors. If you looked at that team, the last title-winning team that Ferguson left, he did very well to manage to get a title out of that squad. And there are a lot of players in there who were coming towards the end of their career. They needed replacing, and it's David Moyes was brought in, as you well know, and then it was Van Gaal, then it was Mourinho, and they weren't the right fit, basically. And then you've got issues with recruitment. If you look at the players that United have chosen to buy since Ferguson left, they've gone for the big names. Angel Di Maria, he came in, he was a flop, possibly one of the biggest flops that United have ever signed. And there's the mix of the bad management, the wrong players, and then the fans weren't getting behind the managers because the managers weren't playing the sort of football that they wanted them to play. You go back through Van Gaal's time at the club, some of the football was so dire and boring. And if you compare that to how United are playing now, that was the difference. The same with Mourinho as well. The difference with Mourinho was they managed to finish second in it when he was in charge, and he came out and said that was one of his biggest achievements. And you look what he did with the team that he did, and you think, yeah, maybe it was. They finished second to Manchester City, good achievement. But the problem that you've got is that he departed from the traditional way of the way Manchester United play. He's a very defensive coach, and we're seeing that now as the game has progressed, and you see the likes of Guardiola and Klopp and the attacking, exciting possession football that you see them playing. That doesn't fit. United weren't playing that. Yeah, they were grinding out. Sometimes they were grinding out 1-0 results, but then the fans weren't happy because it wasn't the traditional United way, which I think when you've seen Solskjær come in, there's been that immediate uplift because he gets that United way. And as soon as he came in, he changed the style they were playing. It was more attacking. It was counter-attacking football. And yeah, obviously there have been some dreadful results under Solskjær. And I think we're going to get onto that later about his position in the club. But I think if you look back at the 4 managers, permanent managers that they've had since Ferguson, he is the one that most fits with the ideology and the philosophy of what the club was built on all those years ago. And if you speak to any of the academy managers, the under-23s coach, they all want to play in a similar sort of way. They want to play this exciting attacking football whilst also being solid defensively. Whereas if you go back through Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, it wasn't the same. And I think that's why a lot of fans got on their back because they didn't like what they were watching. Obviously, the results weren't good enough. But if you look at the calibre of players in the team, nothing was quite clicking. You've got all the rumblings going on in the background as to regards with the ownership, that the fans still aren't happy about that. Are they pumping enough money in to compete with the likes of City, Liverpool, and the money's not being invested right? So then it was Ed Woodward who's getting the blame because he's not buying the right players. And is the philosophy right? Why aren't they buying the right talents to take them forward? And I think bad transfer decisions have cost them, and that's where they find themselves in now. And you can slowly see the rebuild now where they're at, and they're starting to get back on the right path.
Okay, so that brings many questions in my mind. You mentioned the friction between fans and the management and how Ed Woodward has been the main focus of that friction. But the thing is that the same board has worked with Ferguson, and they've got some good results at the end years of Ferguson. But what went wrong with that recruitment strategy?
I think the difference is that David Gill also left at the same time as Sir Alex Ferguson, and I don't think that can be overlooked in terms of importance. Everything changed when he left. It wasn't just one person that left. David Gill was a massive presence at the club, and he went as well. So yes, the owners were there in terms of the Glazers, but you've got Ferguson was there, and he was a big power. He knew what he wanted. So for him to have David Gill there, they had a good working relationship. They got the right players in. So he left, everything changed.
Yeah. And so there has been a lot of talks about this position of director of football or sporting director for the past 2 years, I think. And a lot of people have said that if that position is defined within that recruitment team or within the management team of Manchester United, it might be helpful. First of all, do you think that link up between the manager and Ed Woodward, someone who would be playing that middle ground between the two as the director of football, would be helpful? And are they still looking for someone?
Well, I think that this first was spoken about when Mourinho was sacked. So that's going back nearly a good 2 years now. It's been on the agenda. Are United going to get a director of football? At the minute, I don't think it's something they're actively pursuing. If you look at the signings Solskjær has made in the summer transfer window, he brought in Harry Maguire, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Daniel James. They've all been good signings. They've helped strengthen United where they needed to be strengthened. Bruno Fernandez has looked to be a brilliance-inspired signing in January. So at the moment, the transfer decisions Solskjær is making without a director of football are the right ones. The problem that I think a lot of the fans have had with Ed Woodward in the past is that he is a businessman, and he's very good at that side of the business. Commercial deals, United keep signing more and more and more commercial partners, which no fan, I think, should be naive enough to think that that isn't important. If you look at the situation we find ourselves in now with regards to the pandemic, it's having all those commercial partners and all that money still pumping into the club that's going to enable United to carry on and maybe spend money in the transfer window, where clubs who don't have that many commercial partners or aren't as big a global brand as Manchester United, they are going to struggle. So I think in that side of the business, he is very savvy. I think the issue is that with regards to footballing contacts and the way you view the game and agreements over signings, him and Mourinho didn't agree over prices on players and how important what that player was going to be in terms of getting United maybe into the Champions League spots or challenging for a title. And I think that's where the issues arisen in the past few years, is that he's not a footballing man. He is a businessman, and I think he's very good at the job that he is supposed to do. But would he benefit from some assistance from a footballing man? Edwin van der Sar was mentioned. He's got a similar role at Ajax. Who knows? But the understanding at the minute is it's Matt Judge who does a lot of the transfer negotiations rather than Woodward. Woodward obviously is still involved, but there was a slight restructure as to how they negotiate deals. But in terms of, if you looked at how they negotiated the deal in January to get Fernandez, that dragged on and on and on. Could they benefit from someone who's better at that? Probably yes. But if you look at the last 4 signings, then it's not screaming a desperate need to get one in at the moment.
You also touched a little bit on Ole's role, and I felt like you believe that he will be successful. If you do so, what do you think he had? Because he has had a lot of ups and downs with his record recently. Yeah. But there's this element of hope that is still there, which is not faded up. It has become a little bit weaker, I guess, but it's still there, hoping that he is the one who can bring the United complex to those glory days again. What do you think it is that he has that can help?
I don't necessarily for 1 minute think that he is the best manager in the league or that or he's the best manager United could have possibly got. But I don't think that his job for any minute is under threat at the moment. When they were going through that bad spell of results in the middle of the season, the word coming out of United was that the board are going to stick by him. what they've done is that they're invested with him. They're giving him time to rebuild the squad. And I think if that's what they are going to do and that's what they're committed to doing, and providing United don't end up mid-table, then that's what they're going to have to do. You're starting to see now his rebuild is starting to take shape. The results have got slightly better. They're pushing for that Champions League spot. They were still in the FA Cup. They're still in the Europa League. They could still have a successful season, obviously the pandemic permitting, and we don't know what's going to happen with that. So I think it's difficult because it's his first full season in charge, in control of which players he's brought in, how he wants them to play, and you're starting to see them click. And if that works and the board and he gets the results, which is the most important thing, is what they're interested in, then they will continue to stick with him. But I think they've shown this commitment so far, and if they're investing this much money and resource and time to give him what he wants for this rebuild, then that's what they're going to have to do. Because if they give up now and then they're in the same situation they were in when they got rid of Mourinho, who do they bring in? Are they going to have a different philosophy as to how they want to rebuild the team? So then you're starting from scratch. So unless they give it actual time, I don't think they can decide. They could get rid of him, but it just wouldn't be fitting with what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I have to admit, injuries have not helped him to the injury list, especially at the beginning of the season. Trying to figure out that front three with Martial not being fit, and then all those problems, playing Rashford kind of out of position. So yeah,
the mistake was that they didn't replace their top goal scorer from last season. They let Lukaku go. I think it was quite obvious from early on that he wanted out. So talking of recruitment strategy, they knew for a long time it wasn't just something that was thrown on them on deadline day and then they couldn't bring in a replacement. And fair enough, he said he wants to give Mason Greenwood a chance, which he has, and he's a young lad and he's impressed when he's been given a chance, but it's a lot of pressure to put on the shoulders of an 18-year-old when, especially a lot of pressure on Rashford as well. He's still relatively young in his career. And then you saw that they brought in Igalo in January because Rashford got injured, and then you haven't got an out-and-out centre forward in your team. So I think it was a mistake not to replace Lukaku in the summer, and that's why they're still interested in bringing in a centre forward if the transfer window opens.
Okay, so we'll get to those transfer rumours in a bit. But I also wanted to talk about the role of McKenna and Carrick. How influential have they been in the managing team?
Yeah, so they've come in for quite a bit of stick over the season because McKenna is a really young coach and Carrick obviously went from playing straight into coaching. But if you speak to any of the players, it's the two of them who run the training sessions. Solskjær watches over, but it's Carrick and McKenna who take charge of the training sessions. And Fred in particular has been effusive of his praise of Michael Carrick and how he's helped change his game, because you remember when he first came to the Premier League and he struggled under Mourinho, he struggled to nail down a spot in the starting 11. His form was really patchy, but he's been one of United's best players this season, and he credits Michael Carrick and his one-on-one coaching with him as to how he's helped him progress. And I think Carrick obviously played for the club for years. He's another one that he gets it, like Solskjær, and I think they work well as a team. And every time you speak to, when I spoke to Carrick, I think at the start of last season, and it was all about they working as a unit. It's not just one person. So Solskjær might be the manager, but they have their input as well. And I think the two of them are key to Solskjær, and a lot of the criticism that they've come in for has been unjustified.
Mm-hmm. And so one more question about the board and the ownership. There were some rumors that one of the Glazers is trying to sell his share. And then we had the news about the Saudis wanted to buy a club at the UK, but then the Newcastle thing happened. Would there still be a chance that another deal might happen and Glazers leaving?
At the moment, I can't see that happening. I know that's what a lot of fans would want to happen, that the Glazers will leave. But as long as they're still making money at Manchester United, why would they? So they're rarely at Old Trafford to hear the abuse that was getting hauled at them earlier in the season. Mm-hmm. So I doubt that's going to be any skin off their nose if they hear that the fans don't like them. So as you say, the Saudis are likely to come and take over at Newcastle. There was talk of them coming to United, but I think the reports that some senior United figures had gone over there to meet over a potential buyout wasn't true. So I think it's all very up in the air, and I think it's news that fans would want to hear, but I can't necessarily see it happening anytime soon. Not imminent.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about transfers a little bit now. Well, I think the biggest worry or the biggest story around Manchester United in the past year has been Pogba's deal. Will he stay? Will he go? We had Raiola coming out talking about attacking the managers at the club and then supporting him, kind of backing him off. And then there has been a lot of backlash from the fans, I guess, when he was supposed to be training with the team, but he posted a photo of himself or video of himself inside the car, not training. All these different talks that have been going on with Pogba. But you had recently, you had an article saying that Solskjær is actually excited about seeing him and Fernandez playing. Will he stay or will he go? I guess I'm trying to get to that.
I think the big problem that everyone's going to have this summer is no one now knows what's going to happen in the transfer window. Every single team could have had the perfect scenario planned out as to who they wanted to bring in, who they wanted to sell, how much money they wanted to get for each player. And the current situation means that none of that is likely to happen. The asking prices for players is going to go down. It's unlikely. I can't really see there being a £100 million transfer given the current selling him last summer, but they were looking in excess of somewhere between 160 and 180 million pounds. No team came forward to match the money that they wanted to get for him last summer. Given the financial situation this year, obviously, United aren't daft. They know they would if they wanted to get rid of him, they would have to reduce their asking price, but they still wouldn't want to let him go for cheap. And then you look at where would he go? Real Madrid, Juventus, they're the two teams that are most interested in signing him. Are they in a position where they can spend 80 to 90 million pounds on a player this summer? And the realistic answer is, at this moment in time, nobody knows, because no one knows with the financial situation due to the pandemic what's going to happen. Is the Premier League going to finish? If not, how much money, how's that going to impact the teams in the Premier League? And then you've got to look abroad, and Serie A is supposed to be starting again, but what if that doesn't? And you've got to all these implications, and then the financial implications that's going to have on teams. It's just not, the transfer window will not be the same. Woodward's already come out and he said, he's warned it won't be business as usual. Manchester United are still planning on doing business in the transfer window, and I think they're going to be one of a few clubs who are able to spend because of like what we were talking about before. They're in a better financial position than a lot of other clubs, so they will be able to still go out there and buy players, but they're not going to be going out there and spending £200 million on Harry Kane like that, what was reported just when football stopped. And I think that's a similar situation with Pogba. Do you let him go for a reduced rate now? Do you hang on? His contract's running out. What do they do? It's a dilemma with him, but Pogba is, as he said, open for a challenge elsewhere. Raiola's made no secret of the fact that he's been touting him around, trying to get him a deal elsewhere, but it's all going to be to do with if the figures stack up, because they're not going to let him go on a cheap. And as Solskjær said, can Pogba and Fernandez play together? Of course they can. On his day, Pogba's a world-class player, and you've already seen how well Fernandez has fitted into the team.
Yeah, I think it would be a brilliant duo if he stays and he plays at the level that he has the potential for. And so I guess it's really uncertain about transfers, but do they have any targets at the moment or any specific positions that they have in mind? That is
so Jadon Sancho's been the the number one transfer target for a while now. They really need to sort out the right-sided issue. They've struggled for a designated right winger or right-sided attacker for quite a long time now. And then obviously, like we touched upon before, a centre forward, because Rashford needs backup. And what happens if he gets injured? Interestingly, with Agallo, the issue they've got there is that his loan deal expires on the 30th of May. And United could extend it because the Premier League rules permit, but Shanghai Shenhua want him back for the start of the Chinese Super League season. So that situation's at loggerheads at the minute, because obviously he's living the dream, playing for his boyhood club, would love to stay, but his loan deal's coming to an end and his parent club want him back. Whether United would make a permanent move for him, I think Shanghai wants in the region of 20 million. So I think other options are being looked at there. He's not their number one choice, but time's not on United's side on this one, because they've got a couple of weeks until his loan deal's up. So I think they're also hoping to bring in a midfielder. So they're the three positions that they're hoping to strengthen during the transfer window. But it'll be interesting to see who they manage to get for what price, given the current situation. There was a report, I think it was in the Mirror today, that Aston Villa want £80 million for Jack Grealish. So
do you
that
think
will be interesting to see. I personally wouldn't rate him at £80 million. But...
And at these times, do you think it can happen?
And that's the point. Is any club going to go and spend £80 million on a single player in this window? Probably not. And then if they even did have the money to do it, the backlash that they're going to get is outrageous, because some clubs aren't going to survive during the pandemic. So if other clubs go and they're spending £80 million on one player to strengthen their squad, there's all sorts of permutations and different things that are going to happen. And we don't even know when the transfer window is going to open, how long it's going to be open for, what's going to happen. I just think it's so up in the air that they have their plan that they want to stick by. Whether they'll be able to do that or not, nobody knows. Yeah,
I guess they will regret the Holland's deal not going through now even more.
Yeah, he looks good, doesn't he?
Yeah. So I was reading this article that you had about Sampdoria's claim over Bruno Fernandez. Can you just explain that a little bit more for our listeners and viewers?
Yes. So it's nothing to do with Manchester United. It's to do with when Sampdoria think that they say there was a clause in the contract when they sold him to Sporting, which said if they then sold him on to another club, that they would be entitled to a percentage. I think it was around 5%. So they're arguing that they are entitled to part of the money that Sporting got from Manchester United from the transfer in January, and FIFA have confirmed that they are looking into that. So United, nothing to do with United really. Obviously it is because it involved them, but they've not done anything wrong and they're not being the ones investigated. It's just the transfer as a whole is being looked at to see if Sampdoria have a case and are entitled to a few £1 million.
Get that 5%. And I also wanted to talk about the central defense. There was a lot of buzz with Maguire coming in, and he's been a good player. He has had a role in the squad and influenced the way that United's playing. But the price that they paid for him, was there any way that they could have dealt with it more reasonably in terms of pricing?
I don't think so. City were interested in him as well. And I think you pay a premium as well for British players. So everyone knew that United needed a centre-back, and Solskjær now looking to bring in young, hungry British talent, and Maguire fitted the bill perfectly. You've then got Manchester City are involved as well. So I don't think it was a situation where they could have got him any cheaper. And like you say, he's key at the back. I think it'll be interesting to see when the football does restart again, whether that's the end of this season or the start of next season, who becomes his regular partner, because Victor Lindelof's been quite shaky at points this season. Eric Bailly's been out injured for a really long time, but he's coming back from injury. You've got Axel Tuanzebe, who's trying to stake a claim for a space in the starting 11 as well. So there's quite a few of them there, all challenging for that position next to Maguire. And I don't think Lindelof has done quite enough this season to prove that it should definitely be him in every single game.
Mm-hmm. And again, staying at the defense, I guess the right fullback position was kind of sorted out with Aaron Wan-Bissaka coming in. Will they be relying more on Brandon Williams for the left fullback position? Will he be assured that he will have a more, permanent role in the squad?
I think you've seen since he made his debut against Rochdale, I think it was in September, he's really been in and around the first team since then. He's made quite a few appearances, and he's impressed when he's done that. I think in the last game before football ended for what felt like forever, he actually played at right back as well. So he's shown he's versatile. He's got the right attitude. He's got the right work commitment. But I think Luke Shaw's actually done all right as well this season. So there's a bit of healthy competition with the pair of them at left back. I'm not sure. I don't think you'll be seeing Brandon Williams push back down to the 23s anytime soon. But I'm not sure that he's nailed on that position as first choice left back. He's still young. He's still got a lot to learn, and Luke Shaw's been in all right form.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the number 9 position. Do you have any names that you can give us that they're looking for?
For striker,
yeah.
Dembele is one that's been mentioned, but I think they're just looking at lots of different players, because it's all to do with money again, isn't it? Because you could have a top target like talking of the right wing, Sancho, for example, the top target, but if he's not attainable because Dortmund want too much money in the current situation, then that's where things are going to have to be reevaluated. And there's just different players with different price brackets, and that's the sort of thing where it's going to be interesting to see how the transfer window plays out. Obviously, not just at Manchester United, across the board.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about academy players a little bit too. So Angel Gomez, he's the one that his contract talks have been making some news recently. He has won the Jimmy Murphy Award, which is likes of Giggs and Scholes, and more recently Rashford have won it. I guess recent players who have won it have not been that successful as the older ones. But how are the talks going with him? Are there chances that he might stay in and have a role in the squad?
The last time I had an update, which was last week, was that they were still at a stalemate in terms of contract negotiations. United offered him his deal's up in June. United offered him a new contract at the start of the season, and negotiations have been going on since then, regards to wage and also playing time is playing a small factor in deciding whether to sign or not. The same was happening with Tahith Chong. Obviously, we saw him sign a new long-term deal in March. But at the moment, there is still an offer on the table from United, but Gomez has not signed it. They're not sure whether they'll be extending, because the Premier League said they could extend all players' contracts that were ending just temporarily till the end of the season. We've not heard yet whether they will exercise the option to do that on Gomez's contract. He's not really featured too many times for the first team this season, and given Solskjaer's got a squad that's nearly fully fit, it's hard to see that he would be needed in the final games that they have to play anyway. I know Neil Wood's side have been told to keep fit just in case, because obviously their season was brought to an end, but they were asked to keep fit just on the off chance that they're needed. But I think the likelihood is, given the social distancing measures that are going to be in place, and given how strong Solskjaer's first team squad is now, that it's unlikely any of them will be called upon.
Mm-hmm. And any other academy star players who Manchester United fans should be looking forward to having them in this first team squad?
I did a piece on Hannibal, which I'm not sure he'll be seeing him in the first team before the end of the season. He's still really young, but United brought him in from Monaco last summer, and he's had a promising first campaign with the under-18s, made a few appearances for the under-23s. He's an exciting midfield prospect. And then you've got quite a few in the 23s. I was having a chat with Neil Wood today, the under-23s manager, and the ones he named check were Ethan Galbraith, Dylan Levitt, Ted Mengi, Deshaun Bernard and James Garner. And I think they're the players that you saw when United played in Astana and they were all given a chance there. I think that group, they're the ones that are looking to push on into the first team. And Solskjær's shown that he's prepared to give them opportunities as and when he can. So it'll just be a case of next season seeing whether they go out on loan. That might be a better pathway for some of them to gain more exposure and more first team opportunity, or whether they stay around at United because Solskjær feels like he might be able to bring them into the first team setup.
Mm-hmm. And so, given that the season was stalled, but up until this point, who has been your player of the season at Manchester United this season?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think Marcus Rashford's got to be up there. Before his back injury, he was having the best season that he's ever had, and to go in with that pressure as well, knowing that they'd sold Romelu Lukaku and all the pressure was on him to deliver. I think he'd definitely be in there. Some people are even saying Bruno Fernandez should win it for the impact that he's had in such a short space of time, which I can see the argument for that, because he has definitely brought the team back to life again and his impact has been amazing. But I think over the season, maybe Rashford. I think there's a few like that though. Like we were talking about Fred. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at the progression from where he's come from to where he is now, and he's been so important for United this season, it's not been a case of there's been one really, really amazing player. I think there's been a few that have been really good, and if they ever have an end of season awards, I think it'll be a tight one.
And you mentioned Fred. What changed for him? Because his game has changed a lot ever since Mourinho has left. And so what are the new circumstances that have made him excel that much?
I don't necessarily think that Mourinho was the sole problem with Fred. I think if you look at a lot of players that come from abroad into the Premier League, it takes them time to adapt. And United at that time there wasn't time for him to adapt. They really could have done with him going straight in and being the form that he's in now. And the difficulty he had with him is that he went in and he had a bad game and then he was hooked and then he wasn't given a chance for ages. And then how you can't really get that sort of momentum going because you come into a new country, it's a new league, there's no continuity because every time you play, you're not very good. And understandably, they're not getting another chance. And once he started to be given a more consistent run of games, I think he started to see his form pick up. And then you read interviews with him that he's done during this lockdown period. He speaks about how Michael Carrick's helped him with possession and movement and all that sort of thing. But that's also to do with, I think it's more experience of being in the Premier League. He's been in the Premier League now for a relatively long period of time to learn things and watch and see how it's different from where he used to play in Shakhtar. So I think it's definitely been a learning curve for him and it's taken him time to find his feet. And now he has. You can see the reason why United wanted to buy him in the first place, because at first everyone was branding him in the flop category, which is a bit unfair, and you see now, and he's had a great season.
And one final question. If things don't work out well for Solskjær, who do you think they will go after for the coaching position? And who would you like to see?
Well, It's funny. I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, and we were like, "Who could they get?" Because they were interested in Pochettino. He's now being linked with the Newcastle job, so it's another situation where it's to do with timing, isn't it? If Solskjær was to leave at the end of this season and Pochettino was still available, would they still be interested in? Quite possibly. If it was to be another season and another season, it depends where all these players are. But Nagelsmann is the young, exciting manager. I think that most fans of any club would like to see how he would manage at their club. He's done really well, and he's still young. And if you think how he's going to progress throughout his career, then that would be an exciting one to see how he would get on. But I think at the minute, I don't think Solskjaer's going anywhere.
And how about Ryan Giggs? Will he fit?
Again, bring him back.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, we will see you on our pod again. I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope that it wasn't a drag for you.
Oh, no, it wasn't at all.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. No problem. Take care.
You too. Thanks.